Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast on the hidden costs in a cannabis testing business, what lab owners shouldn't overlook. I'm your host, Mrinal Kanti Chatterjee, Marketing Manager at cloudlimbs.com. Today, we are honored to have an exceptional guest with us, someone whose career spans over 20 years of impactful contributions to biotechnology, environmental science, and cannabis testing. Let's welcome Ini Afia.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let me give you a brief introduction about Ini. Ini is a seasoned analytical scientist and business consultant specializing in laboratory startups, operations, and analytical method development. A recognized leader in the cannabis industry, Ini has played a pivotal role in shaping analytical standards, with many of his methodologies serving as the foundation for industry wide practices, including those adopted by leading analytical instrument vendors. With over 20 years of expertise in analytical chemistry, laboratory management, and regulatory compliance, INI has held leadership roles across industries, including biotechnology, environmental science, and cannabis testing. As a business consultant and laboratory executive, INI has designed and optimized laboratory workflows, developed and validated analytical methods, and trained scientific teams on cutting edge instrumentation such as LCMS, ICP, GC, and qPCR. His work has spanned method development, regulatory compliance, and strategic business growth in analytical sciences. Currently, INI travels the country training scientists in various biotech spaces, including several universities, state universities, government contractors, and Silicon Valley startups. Holding a master's in bacteriology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, INI combines a deep scientific foundation with hands-on technical expertise to drive innovation in analytical research, laboratory operations, and sustainable engineering solutions. He also serves actively on the scientific advisory board of CloudLimbs. INI, we are thrilled to have you today on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be part of Cloud Limbs and be able to, share what little knowledge that I have with you all today. Thank you.
Okay, let's start. To understand the economics of the cannabis testing business, why are cannabis testing labs usually expensive to start? And what are the key areas where costs add up quickly?
Yes. So you see, that is, a good start to this. So cannabis labs are usually probably, in my experience, one of the most expensive labs to start, primarily due to the sheer cost of equipment. But let's break it down. There's a few things. There's equipment costs, there's a real estate and lab space that's necessary. There's a staffing, compliance, and utility costs. So when we talk about equipment, there's various equipment that are used throughout the cannabis lab space. We're talking about high-level instrumentation like LCMS, GCMS. These are equipment that cost upwards of $300,000 a piece. Okay, so generally, equipment is going to be one of your largest capital expense, right? And we'll get into this because people think capital expense is fixed, but not in this case. So we talk about equipment costs being a majority of it, $1 million or so or more. And then you got to look into the real estate. Usually, you need a specialized lab space, that's along the regulations. And those comes with usually high lease rates. They're zoned in industrial zones and they need to have specialized setups and spaces, gas lines, whatnot. Apart from that, staffing, a lot of people overlook staffing. You're going to have this high-level instrumentation, really tight analytical instrumentation. You need the right staff to be able to operate this proficiently. So usually your staffing is a huge cost on this. I mean, when we talk about folks who can proficiently analyze for pesticides using an LC triple quad, those are salaries that are upwards of $100,000, right? And you need a few of these people. So staffing costs and hiring this skilled personnel, technicians, managers, you need to be competitive with salary, of course. So that goes quite high as well. And then you think about it, this high level instrumentation uses a lot of power. So you're dealing with you're pulling a lot of power from the utility companies. People underestimate. You think maybe cannabis growing is usually where all the power comes in, but the laboratory pulls a lot of power as well. So you're going to consume significant energy, significant waters, and other overheads that's usually necessary to efficiently operate the lab. So yeah, those are just some of the things that I think people overlook as to why or how it may be very expensive to operate the laboratory.
Thank you so much for breaking that down. It's eye-opening to see how these foundational elements play such a crucial role in determining the financial trajectory of a lab. Now,
Yes.
let's move on to the next question. Selecting testing instruments is a crucial decision for lab owners. What factors should they consider to strike the right balance between cost and quality?
Hmm. This one's an interesting one because selecting instruments. I mean, these are some of the things that I end up doing a lot of times for my clients. Selecting instrument, and I have to say, as I grow, well, because we all grow up, right? As I grow up, we all learn. I've turned over a new leaf. I used to be a little bit more biased towards an instrument vendor. But as you grow and you learn and you understand that it's not all about, a particular type of instrumentation just because you're comfortable with it. Okay. You have to consider a few factors. Number one, total cost of ownership. Okay. You have to understand how much is it going to cost to purchase this? Not just that, but maintenance, service, and consumables, which we'll all get into a little bit later. It's more than just the initial price. And these are a lot of the highly overlooked things that people don't pay attention to. What is the reliability of the instrument? Again, there are a myriad of instruments out there from myriads of vendors. You have to think about what is its reliability, what is the support that you'll be getting from the instrument vendors. And of course, we're going to touch on that too, because a lot of people think they have to go to the instrument vendor for the support, but no, there are other resources out there that I'll be touching on here shortly. Your testing needs. What is it that is required? Let's talk about even regulatory wise, right? Do you need a GCMS? For some of the analytes that you may be testing, different different jurisdictions have different testing requirements. So you may or may not need a GCMS. You may not need an FID. So you have to think about what is it that I need and where can I get that? Okay. And of course, you have to think about the throughput and efficiency of those instruments. Sometimes you think about, well, the throughput and efficiency all depends on my process and the methodology, right? I often work with my clients to get them a really high throughput, quick, and robust method, right? It's not just about quick, it's got to be robust. But that can't necessarily work on all types of instrument. If you think about something like a GC, what is my ramping rate of an oven? That makes an effect as to how fast your method run. Are you using an UHPLC versus an HPLC? What kind of flows can I get on that? Okay, so that's important. And future proofing wise, you have to think about the upgradability of the instrument. Can I upgrade this instrument and how can it scale to support my future needs? So you always got to think about when you start up a lab, what are my future costs? How might regulations change? So will this instrument be able to continue to support that? And of course, all else, your budget counts, right? Because you may want to buy the Ferrari of instruments, but your budget is more of a Toyota Tercel, right? So you have to fix all that in. What is my budget and work it out? And also, a lot of people think, oh, I have to go in one manufacturer and buy all my sets and instruments with that. Yeah, sometimes that may make life easier in terms of plug and play and whatnot, but no, that is not the case. You don't have to stick with one manufacturer and buy everything in one, right? Usually, if you have a car at home and you have multiple cars, usually not going to Toyota and buying all your cars. Some people do, but some people like a little variety. It offers what you need. You want the weekend car, a little speed, you get that. You want the daily driver, you get it from somewhere else. It's more reliable. So you have to be able to balance all of that.
That's a valuable insight. I totally love the examples you gave. Yeah, I agree that laboratory owners should adopt a holistic approach that takes into account long-term costs and benefits associated with various equipment options.
Yes, indeed.
In terms of consumables, what are some of the most overlooked expenses and how can lab managers reduce these costs?
Okay, consumables are a good one. So, when you're running a laboratory, especially in the cannabis space, where you're dealing with a whole lot of various matrices, okay, reagents are and chemicals are highly overlooked. Okay, so you have to understand the ongoing cost of getting not just any reagent, but high quality reagents. You have to look at consumables like vials, pipette tips. Are you buying some of these things in bulk? Are you buying them from a quality vendor? Are you buying them without compromising quality just to reduce costs? This is important. Inventory management system, where is that coming from? Is it something that's coming from, let's say, your limbs, or is it a standalone thing? Some of these other ancillary things that you need to effectively run a lab. So for instance, I've often performed cost analysis for some of my clients, and we find that chemicals are a large part of their overlooked cost. Once you perform a cost analysis and you go down, you drill in deep to see cost per sample, and you look at how much chemical is used per that sample, and you look at where they're buying it, which vendor they're buying it from, what costs are they buying that at, you really come to find out that a lot of them spend a lot more money on chemicals and reagents than they need to. They're buying from the wrong source. Example, the instrument vendor. Don't do that, right? So these chemicals cost a lot. You have to be able to balance their costs with the high quality. You don't just buy from anybody. You have to understand, is my process using too much chemicals, or using, maybe I could be more efficient with how I'm diluting so that I'm using a little bit less. This costs add up quickly. And oftentimes people don't even factor this into the actual cost of the test. And they end up finding out later on that, hey, I'm losing money where I shouldn't have been losing money.
Thank you for letting the audience know that what they often miss in their estimates. Proper inventory management and smart purchasing decisions can really add up to significant savings over time.
Yes,
This
sir.
podcast is indeed becoming more and more interesting with every question.
Happy to
Let's
hear it.
move on to the next one.
Mhm.
Staff training is essential but costly, and it's a no-brainer. How can labs reduce training expenses while ensuring staff remain proficient and compliant with regulations?
Mm. Um, Really great one. And this is something that's right along the lines of, what I've been working on. Staff training is essential. And there are a whole lot of resources out there, you know, and I'm not talking about ChatGPT, right? Because people think, oh, I can get online and learn. I actually had somebody tell me that they could be a chemist using Google, which is really, well, it blows my mind, but we're not going to speak on that. But there's a whole lot of resources out there. There's e-learning, there's digital trainings out there, right? Virtual training programs for routine compliance and technical duties. Okay. Um, Also, a lot of times you have to invest in the employee, like on-the-job training. You have to incorporate hands-on learning with either experienced staff or whatnot to really reduce your external training costs, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit. You can also cross-train staff. You can train employees to manage multiple roles in order to improve your operational flexibility and reduce the need for extra hires, right? But one caveat with this is that a lot of times a C-Lab trying to cross-train their employees is essentially hire them right away and immediately cross-training them on several assays. You may hire somebody that has an expertise in LCMS, pesticides analysis. It doesn't mean they know how to operate a GC. Oftentimes, I actually find it's one or the other, right? You either have somebody that's highly proficient in a GCMS and not so much in an LCMS, or vice versa. So I find labs finding that, oh yeah, let's get these people cross-trained, when really maybe the individual doesn't really have a full proficiency in their initial duties, and you're getting them cross-trained. So you have to make sure you don't compromise quality when you're cross-training. Make sure they're well proficient in their initial job, then cross-train them in another assay. And of course, finally, you can partner with external vendors. Okay, so you can basically take advantage of opportunity offered by external parties and groups such as myself. I spend a lot of time traveling the country currently training folks on instrumentation and method development. and not just in the cannabis industry. This might be, a little bit of a cost, but the return on investment is really high. So you have to understand there's a third party where oftentimes I walk into a laboratory, you may think something is, it's pretty straightforward, an HPLC that everybody knows. No, that's not the case. You have to understand a lot of times when you get people from various backgrounds, I go through universities and a lot of students graduating don't have hands-on experience with this instrumentation. Yes, they may graduate with a chemistry degree, but you can guess how many times they've touched an HPLC during their undergrad program. Oftentimes they don't touch it much, even in their graduate programs. So I go in there and teach them how to use the instrument, how to develop a method, how to troubleshoot the instrument, how to maintain it, and eventually get them proficient. And of course, if you invest in something like that, then you can go back to the other ones. Once you have a highly trained individual, now you can have them, give on-the-job training to other employees and cross-train in other instruments. So this is very important to keeping up your efficiency, being able to retain employees, and making sure that meeting those turnaround times.
Absolutely great suggestions, Sini. I'm confident that your suggestions will benefit both new and established laboratories.
Yes, sir.
One of the most expensive aspects that prospective and existing lab owners don't realize until it's too late is the cost of maintenance plans for their multi-million-dollar instruments. What role does proper equipment maintenance play in controlling long-term costs for cannabis testing labs, and how can labs choose the right maintenance plans?
Oh, wow. Yes, this is very, very important. So hopefully, if people don't get anything else from this podcast, they can understand this. Okay. Maintenance is pertinent to your survivability in this industry, and you have to choose the right one. First of all, you have to make sure you execute a maintenance contract. And when I say that, let me be clear, it does not have to be with the instrument vendor. Okay. There are plenty of great resources that I've been directing folks to out there that are highly proficient, providing the same level at a fraction of the cost that instrument vendors are using, okay, that are offering you. We know that the instrument maintenance costs usually go to about a third of the instrument cost. So you're talking about being able to execute hundreds of thousands of dollars in instrument maintenance costs per year based on how many instrumentation that you have, but it will be in the hundreds of thousands. Okay, so you have to have that. So you have to have the right maintenance plan. And not just that, you have to perform preventative maintenance. You might go to your vendor and you get quoted all sorts of levels. You have the gold, silver, bronze, whatever scaling they want to use. And people not really coming into the business, being aware of this cost, may go for, the cheapest one, the bronze, or let me just get a parts service agreement. And they don't understand that if you go on that route where you're just having the vendor there they give you maybe a minor discount when you have an issue, they come in and fix it with the parts, you'll realize quickly, once you run into that first issue and have to pay for that parts, that you will not be saving any money and it's actually going to cost you more. So it's important that you have preventive maintenance going on at minimum an annual basis. These are high-level instrumentations, and I find that instruments such as the LCMS or the GCMS usually crap out first, right? You're going to have issues. The cannabis matrix is really harsh, really difficult on these instruments. And I'm not saying that the vendors and the manufacturers don't do the due diligence, but I don't think they understand or they're taking into account what cannabis matrix is really doing to this instrumentation. So it's important that you get a preventive maintenance plan, that you continually clean your instrument, and you combine this with your processes, right? We're talking about sample cleanup, a nice robust process, low dilution, or I should say high dilution matrix introduction. So you go to a third party that's highly proficient, that I've been working with for a lot of these cannabis industries that can provide a fraction of the price with the same level, higher level of proficiency, and you get that executed. That way you make sure your instrument upkeep time is high, you're meeting your turnaround times, and you're not sitting around waiting on a vendor, because even if you have a vendor agreement, based on what plan you have, once you're ready to execute this, you have to wait a few days for them to come out, maybe a week. You don't have that kind of time in a cannabis lab when we're talking about 2-day turnaround to be waiting on a vendor to come out. So if you execute the right contract, the right maintenance plan, um, you'll be able to really make sure that you're upkeeping your lab and running smoothly. Reach out, if you need any of that help, but it's really important that labs have this kind of situation set up correctly.
Great. That was really a thought-provoking answer, with maintenance costs often being overlooked. Preventive maintenance is most certainly the key to avoid unexpected and costly breakdowns, as you said.
Mhm.
Now, let's jump on to the next question. Obtaining certifications, accreditations, and regulatory approvals can take a lot of time and money. What strategies can new lab owners use to reduce these expenses and stay on the right side of regulations?
Mm, yes. So a lot of times this also comes as a surprise to lab owners. There in the cannabis lab space, there are quite a few regulatory approvals and accreditation that you have to get. Primarily everybody knows about ISO 17025 that you have to get, and that is a process. But in order to execute this well, you have to plan early. Okay. You have to, as you're going through your lab setup, you have to be preparing for this certification process. You have to be working concurrently in getting that ready to be executed. Time is not on your side when you're setting up a laboratory. Even if you have the best laid plan, sometimes you run into a situation where the accrediting body has some kind of extended time period for appointments, for on-site assessments and whatnot. So you have to plan accordingly. In the cannabis industry, there's a lot of industry resources out there that you can participate in, industry groups, to stay up to date on some of the best practices and regulatory changes that are, as you know, if you're in the cannabis industry, regulatory changes are a norm, right? It is essentially bound to happen. Also, you have to focus on your quality management. And I'm not just talking about when you're going through ISO 17025, you write a quality management document and then you stick that in the back of the lab and forget about it. No, you have to ensure that your internal processes are aligned with regulatory standards from the start. You start out with a high quality management system, you're bound to continue using that throughout your processes. As you know, what's been happening in the cannabis industry with recalls and whatnot, you get this set, you are likely to avoid some of these recalls that are happening, right? So you plan early, you use industry resources, and you focus on quality. Key focus on quality, and I think you should be okay.
Thanks, Ini. Great information. I believe that planning ahead and staying informed are great strategies to avoid unnecessary expenses and non-compliance.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So another key consideration for labs is waste management. How can waste reduction, proper disposal, and recycling initiatives help lab owners reduce costs?
Hmm. Yeah, waste management is a huge cost that we don't think about. Um, I know of a lab that, wasn't properly working on their waste management. And guess what? They got fined by the regulatory bodies. They had to pay a huge fine for not properly disposing of their samples. Um, it's something to really pay attention to. You have to have an efficient waste management system. Okay, you have to implement processes to minimize both the chemical and the sample waste, which in turn reduces your disposal fee. So if you're working on a lot of things that I help my clients with is process improvement, right? In that process improvement, you're also working with um, uh, basically a fission sample prep. Okay, so what dilutions are you doing? Can you reduce the amount of solvents that you're putting out there? Can you reduce the amount of consumables, the amount of beakers that you're ending up using, disposable ones? And then speaking of those, recycling, we get a lot of plastic through the labs. Are there recycling programs that you could use? If you emptied those beakers and then rinse them, could you be able to actually either recycle them appropriately? Get a lot of 4-liter glass bottles. If you rinse and clean those, can you recycle them appropriately and reduce that waste cost. You don't have to have them picked up if they were clean. Could you send it through the normal recycling route? And then, partner with waste management companies, accredited ones, especially in a state like California, where you have to make sure that they're accredited to handle cannabis waste, that they're not just saying, oh, yeah, we can handle it, and they take your waste and dump it offsite somewhere. And guess who eventually is going to be liable for that? Not them. Yes, they'll have to pay your own, but you, the lab owner, should have done your due diligence, because you may be found liable for, waste that's dumped from your lab inappropriately. So you have to make sure that they're licensed, okay? And then again, just find ways to reuse and repurpose. You don't have to use 50 mil microcentrifuge tubes, right? You can use 50 mil graduated that are class A, that are cleanable and reusable glass, right? So there are ways to minimize your waste and your costs along those routes. And these are things, I definitely help my folks with as well.
That's excellent advice. Sustainable practices can not only save costs, but also contribute to a greener industry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is one of my favorite questions, which we often get.
Mm-hmm.
Informatics tools such as the LIMS can be game changers for labs. How can these tools help lab owners improve efficiency, optimize resource utilization, and ensure quality management while minimizing costs?
Okay, so we know that a LIMS system is critical for a laboratory, all right? Starting off with data management. You have large amounts of data to manage, right? In a cannabis laboratory, for example, we're talking about all the assays, the potencies, solvents, pesticides, heavy metals, water content, moisture, micro. All of these are being run concurrently, and you have to efficiently and effectively manage all this data. And you have to have high traceability as well while reducing errors. So if you don't have a right LIMS system, you might be in for a reckoning. These are all huge data inputs that need to be managed effectively, okay? Along those lines, you have to improve your workflow. So talk about workflow optimization. You have to use some processes that are helping you process data a little quickly. We're talking about automated sample tracking, testing processes, automated reporting, and things that are pre-built in and validated in order to be able to save time and reduce human error, which we see a lot of. Resource tracking. Some of the best LIMS have resource tracking. You're able to use it to track your reagents, your consumables, even your time spent. A lot of times I go and doing a third-party audit to do a resource tracking for the laboratories, be able to show them how much time they're spending per process and how they can improve that time, right? The best LIMS systems can help you with this as well, and basically find you ways to identify these efficiencies and be able to cut costs. Compliance management. This is key. You see the news, you see the recalls. How do you manage compliance and ensure that you're adhering to regulations while maintaining accurate records and audit trails? The LIMS is pertinent to this. Compliance management, the regulatory body comes in and wants to see a data packet. Are you able to produce that? Are you able to show that traceability? Are you compliant by showing that traceability from, people talk about seed to sell, but in the laboratory, essentially, from your pickup to your reporting, you have to be able to traceably show that, okay? Your quality management system is not just, it's not just a document, it's an entire overarching process. Your quality management system, are you able to, in terms of quality controls in the laboratory, are you able to set those up, derive those QC charts and track them in real time, understanding where things are going wrong, understanding where deviations are happening, understanding what trends are happening in your lab? A good LIMS is able to help you kind of set that up appropriately and be able to easily mark an outlier data, right? You have your quality groups being able to look at those on a daily or even get automated alerts when things are out of specification. Okay, that's important. We know how finicky some of these test results are. They have to be within a tight bound, and being able to track that automatically is really going to help you. Of course, there's also cost efficiency. It's important to understand the hidden cost of a limbs in order to reduce the cost of ownership. Okay. The limbs is not just about, if you get a software from a third party, it's not just about getting that software and running it. There are other costs that accompany that, right? And usually you only realize them at the very end. So cost is related to training, technical support, configuration. We're talking about some of this, some limbs, you have to understand that there are user fees, per user fees. So depending on how many staff members you have that need to access that limbs, you will be charged user fees per those users, okay? And your configuration, what do you want? Do you want external sample tracking? Do you want QC? Are those all included? Or this add-on things that you now realize that you need, but you need to pay separately for that apart from just having the LIMS system? You know, the instrument integration, does it talk to your instrument? Again, you should have a LIMS that is amenable, right? Not just being able to talk to one manufacturer instrument. You should be able to talk to all your instruments, right? At least the non-analog ones, right? Even the analog ones, there are ways to talk to them as well and automatically grab that data into your LIMS. This reduces human error as well, right? It reduces transcription. If people have to write down things and then go put it in, you know, mistakes happen. People, you know, transpose numbers, you know, they put 12 instead of 21. And so being able to grab that data in reduces those human errors. Even your COA templates also that are being offered is another thing. What do they offer? People, you know, speaking of configuration, if they have to configure that COA to be specific to your laboratory, that may be a cost. You have to understand what are some of those costs that go into setting those up, speak to your LIMS provider and understand how those are presented, and then make a sort of a good decision, right, during that process. So it's important to not only have the appropriate LIMS, but understand what is necessary to keep that running effectively.
I totally agree with you, Ini. A model LIMS is not merely a solution for current challenges in cannabis testing. It's a strategic investment for the future. And as you said, there are hidden costs of a LIMS, like some vendors charge for instrument integration or product training. So I think it would be better to choose a LIMS vendor who offer these services for free.
Exactly, precisely.
Effective contingency planning is crucial for uninterrupted lab operations. How can labs budget and plan to minimize financial impact during unforeseen disruptions?
Yeah, so great question, and something that's very kind of pertinent to the times. So first thing, you have to diversify your suppliers, right? You have to build relationships with multiple suppliers for key consumables and equipment to avoid disruptions. Again, we talk about getting your equipment all from one source. That or may not be the appropriate route for you, but oftentimes I would not recommend it in terms of um, uh, uh, sort of contingency planning, right? Especially when it comes to ancillary things like consumables and whatnot and chemicals, right? Capital equipment, maybe, you know, that's something else we can talk about. But you have to diversify that relationship. Make sure that you have multiple accounts going with multiple companies, that if something goes down here, you're able to, you know, go to the next vendor and be able to have continuity in your process. You have to maintain backup equipment, okay? Now, this may be easier said than done, but you have to make sure you have backup equipment in case your primary equipment fails. For example, in the cannabis laboratory, we know that these equipment are very expensive, but I always advise my clients, if you can buy multiple equipment, at least have multiple LCMS and GCMS. Yes, I know those are actually the most expensive equipment in the laboratory, but they're also the first ones to go down. So if you have multiple of this, you know, at least two, not only are you improving your turnaround time and your throughput, but you're also able to have that continuity. One goes down, you can still work on one. Of course, that comes with having a preventive maintenance that we spoke on earlier, making sure that these are kept up and running cleanly. Okay, you have to have an emergency fund. Okay. And this just is not just for unexpected costs during your operation, but even in startup, folks don't seem to understand or find out the hard way that when you start up a cannabis lab, oftentimes you have to plan for about 3 years or so of no revenue, right? While you're starting up, people think, okay, as soon as I start up, I'm going to have clients, I'm going to get moving. But you plan for at least 3 years of no revenue or a subpar revenue. You have to have that emergency fund to cover that. And also while operating, emergency fund, because as instruments go down, we see a mass spec go down, and God forbid you didn't have some maintenance plan or some warranty, and now you have to buy a new one. We're talking about now you have to find a way to shell out $250,000 to $500,000 to purchase a new equipment. So you have to have that emergency fund, ensuring that your lab can continue to operate smoothly. You have to implement, I think, a cloud LIMS-based system. Okay, this is very important because if you have a cloud LIMS-based system, you're able to ensure data integrity and accessibility even during some kind of natural disaster or even an infrastructure breakdown. So, for instance, I have a story of a laboratory, cannabis laboratory, that actually got hacked and held for ransom. Somehow, they installed a third-party software, got into the system, shut down everything in the lab. All the screens went dark, including their LIMS system, which was locally stored, and they were held for ransom. Now they're stuck, no way to get anything back. They have to negotiate with the hackers to start figuring out how to pay a ransom. Law enforcement can't really do much for them. But at least, at the end of the day, unfortunately for these guys, they did not have a cloud LIMS backup. So while this was going on, all of their LIMS data was gone. Everything was gone. Imagine if they had a cloud backup, like a offsite server and whatnot. Yes, they may lose some things, and even if they don't pay the ransom, they're able to recover all the data, have that traceability. Because guess what? When the regulators come knocking, they don't care that you got hacked. They want to see data from a particular sample, and all of a sudden you're saying, oh, I don't have it because I got hacked. Well, that means you didn't do your due diligence. You didn't protect your investment. So having a cloud-based LIMS, I think, is very important. And of course, it has to be accessible and not accessible to hackers, have backups offsite, frequent backups. Okay. So that's crucial. You have to develop a flexible staffing plan. Okay. Like we spoke on before, cross-train your staff to be able to perform multiple roles. Okay. Ensuring, coverage during absenteeism or staff turnover. We know that the cannabis lab staff turnover is, it's almost basically a fact, right? So if you have cross-trained staff and staff are turning over, you're able again to keep operating smoothly, right? Maintain an inventory reserve. This is critical, okay? So you have to keep a stockpile of some of your essential consumables and reagents to prevent operational halts during some supply chain delays. There's been times, for instance, nowadays, we don't know what's going to happen with all these tariffs that are taking place. What delays are going to happen? We understand that a lot of our chemicals actually does come from China, right? If there's some trade war going on and you're being locked in and you cannot access your chemicals, or the prices are too high, if you have a list of stockpile, you're able to continue running smoothly while you figure out where to access affordable chemicals. So you always have to have that stockpile of inventory, consumables, critical reagents. Of course, always keep an eye on the expiration date. You don't want to stockpile forever, and next time you need to use it, you find that it's expired. That goes against regulatory guidelines and actually just good science, right? Last but not least, you have to have a business continuity plan. These are actually some things that are required by ISO bodies, some certain ISO accreditations, having a business continuity plan. So you develop a plan for all critical areas of the lab to keep operations running during disruptions. It's not just about the instrument, but staff as well. Have a plan if so and so leave, what happens if this instrument goes down? What happens if I'm hacked? What happens? You have to have a good plan in place. That way you can easily jump to your plan once these things do happen, because inevitably they will. So have a business continuity plan. It's very important.
Absolutely. That's an excellent framework. A well thought out business continuity plan is crucial for managing unexpected challenges. So, cannabis testing labs, please take note of what Ini said. Have ample fund for running your lab without profit for 3 years. Have backup staff, cross train them, have a cloud based LIM so that you don't lose your data.
Mhm.
As we draw our conclusion to a close, let's move on to the next question. As most states legalize cannabis, what additional cost saving trends do you see emerging in the industry?
Hmm. Additional cost saving trends. Well, as most states legalize cannabis, we're starting to see, because of things that have been happening across the space, a lot of states are starting to standardize methodology, testing methods. Previously, cannabis labs all think they had a leg up because they had some kind of proprietary methodology, which, haven't um, been um, having gone through a lot of these laboratories, you start to note that no, it's actually not proprietary, the iterations of the same methods. But that's besides the point. Standardization, I believe, is going to reduce costs, reduce the duplication of efforts, right? Labs are able to share methods and things that are going to be robust. It also brings in a little transparency and a little more trust into the industry. You don't have to worry about folks trying to inflate testing results, right? So it's going to be cost savings because labs are no longer running around trying to find and pay for methodologies that seemingly may bring them more value in whatever sense, right? So you standardize this, something as simple as potency, standardize that test. It's going to reduce costs. It's going to make sure that with input from all the laboratories and stakeholders, that you have a robust method that we can have trust in. It doesn't mean it's necessarily the best there is. It doesn't mean that you couldn't extract more cannabinoids with a different methodology or solvents. It just means that you have a method that is representative, that is congruent across at least a state. And we know that this will probably be the case when and if it ever goes federally legal, right? There will be some kind of congruency of methodology. Cost savings also, maybe partnerships and collaborations. Labs begin to partner with other labs to share resources, share equipment, right? You can outsource. Let's say you're setting up a lab. Maybe you don't necessarily need to have all the instrumentation. Maybe you can't quite afford the highest level instrumentation yet, like a GCMS, but you have a partner lab that you can share that resource with, and you send samples that way, right? So while you're building revenue, you're able to, share that resource and be able to save that. I see some of that happening already, and I think that's where we're headed, being able to share some of those resources and actually reduce costs. So yes, those are, I think, at least 2 points that I see where we're headed.
It's really exciting to hear about these trends, Ini. So, Mimi, I would like to thank you for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. Your contributions to the cannabis industry are truly inspiring, and I'm sure our listeners have gathered valuable takeaways. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. If you found this discussion valuable, please share it with your colleagues. Your opinion matters greatly to us. Do share your feedback on this podcast with us at support@cloudlimbs.com. If you have any questions on the discussed topic or are in search of a reliable LIMS, you can reach us at 1-302-789-0447 or send us an email to support@cloudlimbs.com. Until next time, this is Mrinal signing off. Stay safe, stay informed. Bye for now.
Thank you.